I'm Stephen Arms, and welcome to In the Arena of History. This is the third in a series of videos I'm doing on the Bill of Rights of the Constitution of the United States of America. I did my first video on the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, and today I'm going to cover the Third Amendment and the Fourth Amendment. The Third Amendment of the Constitution is,
"No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law."
When most people look at the Third Amendment to the Constitution, they don't think it probably pertains much to the modern world. And there's quite a bit of truth in that. It specifically deals with the idea of soldiers being put within people's homes or within their property, quartered there. During the period before the Revolutionary War, the British government, the king, would send forces into the United States as protectors of the colonies, and that the colonies were expected to have to give them areas to live. Officers were generally quartered in rich people's homes. The soldiers were generally quartered in taverns or in other facilities like that. Sometimes warehouses were converted into barracks, and the colonists were expected basically to pay for them. The colonists hate this, as most people probably would. And this is one of the reasons why this amendment specifically exists in the Constitution. A lot of people are probably of the opinion that, again, it doesn't seem like something that would pertain to the world now. But on the other hand, I guess it's a good sign. At any point that a government starts wanting to put its troops and its forces within the homes or in the property of individuals, you probably know that it's a good indication that you're beginning to get to see the seeds of a tyranny. Now, whereas the Third Amendment of the Constitution probably isn't very prevalent today, the Fourth Amendment is exactly the opposite. The Fourth Amendment is very important on many things that are happening in the United States today, and I believe the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution is actually being abused and ignored by the federal government under many circumstances. Now, the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution is
"The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized."
Now, having heard it, the right of the people to secure their persons, their houses, their papers, and their effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. In other words, you have a right to have your own privacy and have your own private papers and effects. Your home is basically your castle to some extent. And of course, you can have that area searched, but it has to be with a proper warrant issued by a judge, and it has to be upon probable cause. Probable cause meaning it has to be there has to be good evidence to indicate that a crime has been committed. And there has to be an oath or an affirmation to this, which means, in a nutshell, a police officer goes to a judge and says, or a district attorney, we're investigating this particular crime, and we think that there's good evidence of possibility that the murder weapon, the whatever item they're looking for happens to be in this residence, and we'd like a writ to search for it. Well, they have to provide good evidence. They can't just assume that any person they want to search. You can't just issue warrants for 500 people and just search everyone who happened to be in the area's house to see if you can find a weapon or whatever you happen to be looking for. It has to be for a very specific thing. It's the area that has to be searched has to be specific in the warrant, and what they're looking for has to be specific in the warrant. Now, the reason this came into existence is that before the Revolutionary War, the King George was quite inventive in how that he would come up to ways of taxing the colonists. And he put forth what was called the Stamp Act. And the Stamp Act, in a summation, is basically just all official papers, important papers people had to be affixed with a stamp, as in a stamped on stamp, not a postage stamp type stamp, that indicated of the King of England, that England had verified these papers. So you couldn't have leases or marriage license or documents or even things that you posted in public unless they had the official stamp of the crown on it. And you go, well, how did they know that your papers had the proper stamps on it? Well, that's easy. Parliament passed a law called the Writs of Assistance Acts. This is a horrible law, and this is a definitely indication of the reason why the revolution got started, because basically this allowed soldiers to go up and write their own warrants, their own writs to go search an area. They could literally walk up to a house with a piece of paper that they had written up and they had signed and say that they're going to search their house for the stamps that generally they'd be looking for, that your documents are properly stamped. Now they could also look for other things why they were there also, because the warrants didn't have to be specific, of course. But the writs of assistance is a big cause in the American Revolution, and justifiably so too, also, because the point is that any government who thinks so little of its people that it basically says, well, we can just have people come up and write a warrant and go search their stuff anytime we feel like it. Basically, we don't have to have any reason at all. I mean, it's only a step or so away from, well, we just have, our secret police come and they bust into your house and take whatever they want whenever they feel like it. And this is, and the Americans ended up fighting a revolution over this principle as one of the main factors of the limitations on the rights. How little does the king think of us if they're willing to do these acts? Well, the problem with that now is let's move forward to modern times. After 9/11, the Congress was called the Patriot Act. Now I read the Patriot Act, and it's a huge document. There's a lot to it, and I think it violates the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, and that's my opinion, because it allows the agencies involved in this not to directly go to I don't want to get too complicated into it because it's very detailed, but it basically, for all intents and purposes, the FBI and organizations like that can almost write their own warrants. It's got one step slightly in there, but it's not the course of the point of saying we're looking for this specific information for this crime. They can go get warrants on fishing trips. They can do warrants on your internet traffic. They can get warrants on your phones. And they don't necessarily say that, well, that we're looking for acts of terrorism. Well, that's a nice general cause. What specifically are you looking for? What are you seizing? What are you taking? Now, people would say, well, Professor Arms, you're being closed-minded on this, because haven't they protected us from attacks? And I go, you can make that argument, and the question is, would they have been able to still protect us from acts without the sacrificing of our rights and freedoms and the constitutional right of unreasonable search and seizure? Now, what freedoms are you willing to give up for security? Ben Franklin said those who are willing to trade their freedom for security will ultimately lose both. Paraphrase, but that's close. And I think it's something that we need to consider. I mean, we live in a world where terrorism is an issue, and that people have a right to be concerned with it. But on the other hand, do you truly trust the CIA, the FBI, the NSA? Do you truly trust your government enough that they're not going to misuse this power? And I'm a man who's a patriotic man. I believe in supporting the United States of America, and I believe in the government of the United States of America. But governments are made of men and women, and men and women are flawed beings. A person who has power is prone to abuse that power. And do you really want the intelligence agencies of the United States being used as political weapons against people's opponents? There's some indication that may be happening in modern times right now too. Or the IRS may be sicked on your people who are of a different political belief than you are. That happened recently also. This is all the same sort of idea that we're talking about here. The Fourth Amendment is not a suggestion, it's an amendment. It protects us from unreasonable search and seizure, and we should have by no means stand for our government taking that away from us. I hope you've enjoyed this video. A little bit of commentary on the end there, but I'm still in the general parameters of what we're talking about. If you enjoyed the video, please mark that you liked it. If you dislike it, mark you dislike too, but make sure if you're going to dislike, please leave me comments. If you're enjoying this series, please subscribe to my webpage. Thank you very much.